This happened to me last weekend. I'm a 19-year-old guy. My friend had just bought a new house, so he decided to have a housewarming. I had a great time, and just after midnight I decided it was time to go. I tried all the taxi services in our area and got no answer, or was told I would have to wait at least an hour. I live in rural Wales, UK, and we don't have Uber. I'm a student and I work the weekend, so I had to get home soon because I had work in the morning, so I decided to walk home. My phone said it would take 41 minutes, and I was in a drunken state, so I make my goodbyes and refused any offer of company or calling another friend and set off. I was lit, but not drunk, easily followed the directions on my phone, and got about 30 minutes in when I came across the alley I had to take. I sped up as I walked through it, as it was very dark, but got through it and felt silly for being a bit spooked. As I carried on walking, I reached a long pathway and noticed a figure in the distance. I couldn't tell if they were walking towards me or just standing still, but as I got closer, I could see them just standing there smoking a cigarette. I kept to one side of the path and walked past. As I carried on walking, I felt a little uneasy and looked back, and the guy was now walking behind me. I quickened up and hoped to gain distance, but this was a straight path and he kept pace. I knew I was getting close to an area I was familiar with from walking my dog. I knew that it would be a well-lit residential area. Finally, I reached the crossroads and prayed that he would go the other way, but he turned the same way as me. This continued all the way until I was about 2 streets away from the one I live on. I decided I had to lose him on the next corner I took. I ran as fast as I could. I'm a fit guy, so I managed to get to the next street very quickly and up the last alley into the street I live on before looking back, and he was out of sight. I quickly ran into my house and got inside. My parents were in bed, thankfully, so the lights were out, and I took a breath and began to calm down. As my dog ran down to greet me, I gave her a pat and went into the living room, but kept the lights off as I planned to head straight to my bedroom after grabbing a drink. I walked from the hall and into the kitchen as my dog Faith followed, but as I took a drink from the refrigerator, she turned from me and looked at the front door, slanted her head down before slowly walking towards it. I swear I got the creepiest feeling, like my whole body froze as I saw a figure through the small frosted glass panel in the door. I slammed the door in the refrigerator and hid out of view. I was terrified. Faith began walking and jumping at the door. I stayed hidden out of view as she shuffled around, pawing at the door. Suddenly, my dog charged into the kitchen, still barking. She ran past me to the kitchen door and leapt up. I ran into the hall and saw my dad at the top of the stairs. He asked me what Faith was barking about, and I blurted out that a guy had followed me home. He charged downstairs, and Faith was still going crazy in the kitchen. My dad marched into the darkness as I followed, but Faith ran past us to the front door. My dad went into the garden as I held Faith back, and he saw that the front gate rattled. We went to it and looked up and down the street but saw nothing. He decided to stay up, and I went to bed. The next morning in the back garden, we found a rusty knife. It's dirty and had black tape around the handle. We also saw 2 stab marks on the back door. My dad refused to report it to the police, which I think is insane. Someone clearly tried to break in, but he insists that they won't come back. The whole situation has played on my mind all week. It really creeped me out, and I can safely say that I'll call someone for a lift home next time. I've been really into the sub lately, and it's inspired me to share a few of my unnerving stories. This happened ages ago when I was 21. I was a manager for a big box store, but in a town that was an hour drive from me. I lived in a small town and the store was in another small town, both about 10K people each. But in order to promote to manager, I had to transfer, which meant doing a daily drive. I hoped it would be temporary because I dreaded driving these every day, especially late at night because of deer, etc. This was before cell phones were the norm. I did have one, but it was one of those ancient style phones, and I had just got it a week or two before. With these phones, you had to plug them into your car lighter in order to have them work, and they had a cord attached headset. Anyway, one night I was driving home and it was really late, about 1 a.m. The drive is pretty desolate, with houses sporadically throughout, mixed with sections of wooded areas. About 20 minutes before my town is a random casino. I had just passed this casino and a truck pulled out behind me. I didn't think anything of it, but it was noticeable pretty quick that they had been drinking because of their erratic driving. Because of this, I just figured I'd get as much room between us as possible. Also to note, as I was going past them, they had their headlights on of course, and could have easily seen that I was just a young girl by myself. So the truck comes up behind me at a pretty fast rate of speed and goes past me. As they are next to me, they swerve a little bit towards me, and I just think they are much more drunk than I thought, and started slowing down so they could easily pass. As soon as they got in front of me, they started to slow down, way down. It got to the point that we were going 20 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone and still slowing down, like they were trying to stop me. Every time they would get to around 5 miles per hour, I would swerve to the opposite lane and give it gas like I was going to pass them, which would make them temporarily speed up. I could also see a little bit better into the truck. It was an extended cab truck with what appeared to be 5 or 6 guys in it. This was during hunting season, so it wasn't out of the norm to see a group of guys acting ridiculous and drunk this time of year. So they were trying to stop me, and I didn't want to necessarily pass, given what just happened. At a certain point, I had to. So I had to go try and pass the truck, but it blocks me from doing so by getting in the middle of both lanes. I try a couple times with the same result. Then finally, I try to floor it and pass the truck, but it tries to run me off the road. I immediately get back behind them, and I'm freaking out at this point. I have tried to call 911, but there was a huge area of no coverage, and I couldn't get through. After what seems like forever, I finally get through to them, and they send someone out immediately. As I'm on the phone with them, I see car lights in my rearview mirror, and filled with panic because I know this car would try to pass, given that we were going about 30 at this point. Sure as shit, this car comes up behind us and goes to pass, and sure as shit, this truck actually runs them off the road into a ditch. I'm telling the 911 dispatcher this, and in full-blown panic. We were getting close to town now though, and I could see the first stoplight. I wasn't sure what the truck was gonna do, because the one lane splits into two, and there are 2 gas stations up ahead. Right as we approach the first light, I see an officer come in the opposite direction and start flashing them over and over while telling the dispatcher that I see the officer. The officer makes a U-turn and gets between me and the truck. He flicks his lights on and pulls them over. They pull over into the gas station at the main intersection of town. I follow into the gas station to assist the police in whatever statements they need and make sure these assholes are actually arrested. That didn't end up being a problem because they refused a breathalyzer, so they were taken to a hospital where their blood alcohol level was obtained. I really wanted to know more, but the officer didn't elaborate. I kind of wish I would have called up and followed up on it. They never called me to do anything in court, so I guess they didn't need me, but it also means that they're getting away with only getting a DUI. I didn't realize this wasn't okay until way later, much too late to have done anything about it. All I know is the officer said that they were 3 sheets to the wind. God only knows what their intent was, but I was terrified to find out. And thank God for that damn bag cell phone. It could have saved my life. I have posted a few creepy encounters before, but my wife had just reminded me of an incident we had in 2017 when we were working in Utah. This happened in late November 2017 and was on a weekday. Can't remember exactly what day, but I knew it wasn't the weekend as the roads were pretty desolate. I was 33 at that stage and had been working for a family on a ranch for about 4 years. They had become like our second family. We were on work visas from South Africa, so not native to the US, but pretty familiar with everything, as we had been in the area for the 4 years we had worked for them. We decided to make a career and life change after I got burnout at 29 in the corporate marketing career that wasn't going anywhere and was stealing my soul and will to live. We just wanted to scale down and have a more relaxed lifestyle. The ranch was in northern Utah, somewhere between Salt Lake City and Logan. I'm pretty vague as the family is very well known and I would not like to identify them as I respect their privacy. We were almost getting ready to return to South Africa at that stage as our visas were running out. We wanted a bit of a holiday as it had been a busy year, getting married, our daughter was born, etc. We wanted to do a bit of sightseeing before we returned. The owner offered to pay for accommodations and provide spending money and his truck if we would run an errand for him on the way. He had a couple of horses and a trailer that needed to be picked up from a ranch somewhere in Wyoming, with Cheyenne being the closest big city more than an hour away. We jumped at the opportunity as we basically had a week to get there and then a day to get back to his ranch. We visited some awesome places: Park City, Flaming Gorge, Bear Lake, Yellowstone. The whole trip was an amazing experience except for the incident this story is about. That put a bit of damper on the excitement. We drove up to Park City the first day and spent the night with some friends. The incident happened on the second day of the trip. On the way between Flaming Gorge Reservoir and Bear Lake via Green River, we were driving and enjoying the scenery and had just crossed over the Utah-Wyoming border when we spotted the only vehicle for the past 30 odd miles, an old red-brown pickup truck that was parked on the opposite side of the road. There were 2 guys inside. When we were about 150 feet from them, they pulled into the road and made a U-turn. I was pretty pissed as I was going 80 at the time and had to make a hard brake and swerve into oncoming traffic to avoid having an accident with them. I punched on the horn and flipped the middle finger out the window when I passed them. They sped up, flashing their lights behind me, but I just punched it and left them behind. I was driving my employer's new Ram 2500 diesel truck, so there was no shortage of power to get away. A few miles down the road, I could not see them behind me anymore, so I assumed that they had turned off. Probably about 40 to 50 miles up the road, we pulled off into a little America to get diesel and some food. When we got out of the shop, we saw the truck parked across the lot, but no one was in it. We decided to load up and head out, as I was not in the mood for an argument with some redneck cowboys. We headed out and thought that was the last we would see of them. Boy, we were wrong. We were looking for interesting places to stop and things to see on the route, and about 45 minutes or so after we left the Little America, we spotted a sign that pointed to Fossil Butte National Monument. We pulled in and literally had the place to ourselves. We walked around and couldn't see much as it was closed, so we decided to head out. Right as we got to the truck, we spotted the red pickup speeding into the parking lot. I panicked. My wife jumped into the back with our 5-month-old daughter, and I ran and jumped into the driver's seat. Right as I wanted to pull out, the pickup pulled up behind us, blocking us from exiting. I was shitting bricks at this point, screaming to my wife to call 911. The guys jumped out of their truck and started running towards us, one on each side of the truck. Only then did I notice that both their faces were covered what looked like handkerchiefs, like what cowboys usually wear around their necks. Right at this time as well, my wife said, panicking, that she does not have cell service. I was making split-second decisions and noticed that, except the curb and signpost off to the left, there was nothing really solid in front of the truck. I threw the truck in drive, swung the steering to the right, and floored it. The truck plunged through some sagebrush and made a wide turn through the field, back towards the parking area. We raced to the exit. The layout of the parking area is one entrance. The road splits and the parking lot runs in a one-way loop that exits at the same entrance. If it doesn't make sense, pull up Google Maps with satellite view. That will explain it a bit better. We were parked at the far end of the parking lot, and we're now going through the parking lot the wrong way to get out. The other guys were back in their truck, racing to cut us off. They beat us to the entrance as they had a much shorter distance to cover than we did. They proceeded to park their truck sideways across the road by the gate, so there was no way we could get around them without causing serious damage to my boss's brand new truck. We stopped about 150 feet from them. One guy had an aluminum bat, another had some sort of bar or tire iron that he was swinging around. My wife was crying in panic, our daughter was screaming, and I was shaking from adrenaline and fear. Even though the situation was still dodgy, I felt like we were out of immediate danger. The two guys did not move towards us, just standing next to the truck, staring us down. It felt like hours, but it was probably less than a few minutes. I told my wife to buckle our daughter in and look behind the seat for the rifle my boss kept there. She found it and passed it to me. I wasn't worried about the bat and bar, but in case one of them had a firearm. I did not want to make the situation worse, so was still contemplating whether I should use it if they approached and threatened us again, when I noticed a camper turning off the highway towards us. The two guys must have also noticed it, as they looked at each other, got in their truck and sped off. They turned the way they came from, onto the highway, and when we could no longer see them, we started driving. We passed the camper, and an old couple gave us a friendly wave. We wondered if they knew that, to us, they were angels sent from heaven that day. The story ends pretty anticlimactic, and we had a pretty amazing but uneventful rest of the trip. We told my boss what happened when we returned, and his explanation was that they probably were looking for trouble. That's why they cut us off with a U-turn, and then when people react to them, they start a confrontation. It sounded plausible. About a week later, when we were already back in South Africa, I was laying in bed thinking over the encounter when it struck me. From where we first encountered them when they cut us off until Fossil Butte was over 3 hours and close to 120 miles. You don't follow someone that far unless you have sinister intentions. They must have purposely followed us, as there are many different routes that would have led them away from us and turned off the interstate and made 2 or 3 turns since leaving Little America. That made me lie awake for a few more hours wondering what their intentions were and what would have happened if the old couple in the camper did not turn right when they did. This happened a couple months ago to me and my mom. We were driving home from my aunt's house, who lives in the middle of nowhere, in the countryside. So we were on a pretty narrow and bumpy road, which my mom was not super confident driving on. The drive was going normal until a green car appeared behind us, presumably pulled out of some driveway or something. It was driving extremely close to us, pretty much tailgating us on the road that really did not require that since it was so empty. My mom, who was already uncomfortable on the country road, became nervous and decided to pull in at the next house or driveway that came up so they could overtake us. We did, and the car passed. We were both relieved that it was over, but we were wrong. We continued driving at a regular pace, and we didn't see the car for another few minutes. That was until we spotted it at the next house. The car had pulled in there and had its indicators on, meaning it hadn't stopped to park. My mom and I looked at each other, and to be honest, I started getting nervous myself, and I'm usually not frightened easily. The second we passed it, it pulled out and started tailgating us again. My mom was really scared now. The car would occasionally fall behind and intentionally race towards us at a crazy speed, which came across as them attempting to scare us. My mom increased the speed, but it kept up with us easily. I was sure that it was going to crash into us at this point or run us off the road. This continued until we reached crossroads. My mom took the usual left, and I had no doubt that it was going to turn left too. However, it didn't. It continued straight ahead, as if nothing ever happened. I never saw who was in the car, and it still puzzles me. Why the hell would they pretty much be harassing two strangers who had stopped to let them pass after they made it clear that they wanted to? I just can't figure out their intentions other than perhaps being an unhinged driver who was having a bad day. I really thought my mom and I were going to be attacked or worse. One of the weirdest things that's happened to me while on the road. It was October 31st, Halloween. At this time, my parents were still together and hadn't divorced yet. So me and my siblings stayed with each other, but my family did this thing where half of us would go out with my mom and the other half would go out with my father. I have 5 siblings, but at this time my little sister wasn't born yet, so there's only 4. Me and my sister, 3 years younger than me, went with my dad, and my little brother and sister went with my mother. I had called up some of my friends to ask them if they wanted to go trick-or-treating with me, and only one of my friends said that they could make it. Let's just call her Lucy. My dad picked Lucy up and we drove to this big neighborhood. Beautiful houses, so more candy. Lucy and I wandered off while my dad stayed with my sister. I was very hyper and from time to time would run off and leave my friend behind so I could get more candy and get to every house before Halloween was over. Halfway through trick-or-treating, Lucy and I walked so far that no more kids were around us. We chatted about school and drama and what we were going to do with our candy. Shit like that. After what I would say was 7 minutes, we heard a scrapey sound, like someone was scraping something on the concrete. We turned around to the sound and saw a person dressed in a killer clown costume, walking with a bat. Lucy and I were walking in the middle of the street, confused but a little scared. I had always hated clowns, so I sped up a bit, and so did Lucy. We kept turning our heads around to see the clown. After about 30 seconds, the clown stopped walking and stood there facing us. Now at this point, it's quiet and we are very scared, so we told each other that we should meet up with my dad. We whip our heads around to see the clown once more, and out of nowhere, he starts running, full sprint towards us. We burst out running, screaming, and not even paying attention to where we were running. It was a steep and quiet road, like a back road that used to be in my old apartments. The clown was screaming with us. I did not turn back, but Lucy later told me that the clown was holding his bat up like he was going to hit us. Lucy and I hit the corner that led to a familiar street. We crossed the street without a thought in our heads, and when we reached the other side, it was quiet. We didn't hear anyone screaming. He was gone. He was no longer behind us. After running around, we found my dad and told him everything. He believed us because of our tears and screams and the look of terror on our faces. My worst fear is now killer clowns and forever will be. Lucy and I will never forget the moment and talk about it from time to time to this day. It traumatized me. Thinking back at it now, it might have been just a dumbass teenager in a costume trying to scare little kids. What a sicko. I was just taking a drive at night a couple hours ago. I like driving at night, nobody is on the road, and it's just me and music. I have a route I usually take, and have a set to and back. I use this small neighborhood that loops around to turn around and go back after I'm done. As I'm in this neighborhood doing my turnaround, I reach the end of the loop, and that's when this older, maybe 2006, 7-ish sedan pulls out into the street, but is in the middle of the lane. I swerve to barely miss the guy, and he quickly puts his car into reverse and pulls out onto the main street and starts to follow me, trying to gain on me. I put my car in sports mode and start going down the long stretch of road, going 60 in a 35. This dude is a good couple hundred feet away from me. I'm on the phone with the police and this dude is still chasing me. I turn onto the street that is usually filled with police because it's down the street from the station, but no dice. Coming up the road, there's a 4-way intersection you need to stop at. I did the quickest rolling stop because I didn't know if anyone was coming and didn't want to hit them. I gave the guy enough time to close the gap. He tries to come up into the left lane and speed past me to stop me, but I drop my foot on the pedal and hit 70 in this 35-mile-per-hour street and finally get close enough to a cop. I make it to the station. The police officer tells me that this guy said I threw a bottle at his car and that they saw water on the windshield, and the police asked me if I did that. I didn't, and I couldn't prove it either way because the dash cam wasn't set up at all. I didn't have the magnet to mount it. This guy lied to the police while aggressively chasing me. I don't know why this happened. I think it was just a random robbery attempt or carjacking. I learned my lesson though. Night times aren't for driving anymore. Fuck that. So I'm 19 and I coach a 12-year-old traveling volleyball team. At one of our out-of-town tournaments, I was staying at this hotel. Nothing new, as I've stayed at numerous hotels for volleyball ever since I was 9. I was walking into the hotel when I saw a man and a woman getting onto an elevator from afar. The lady was holding the elevator, but I was so far that there was ultimately no point of doing this unless she wanted me to get in the elevator with her. Now keep in mind, before I went to this hotel, I took a couple hits of my dab pen. I know, I'm not the best role model for 12-year-olds, but they were staying in a different hotel. I don't know if I was tripping off the ganja, but it seemed like the lady really wanted me to get into the elevator with her, considering I was walking really slow, yet she held the door open for me anyways. So I got on. I pressed the floor level, and when I reached my level, I started to walk out. And Shada looked back at her, kinda like when you communicate with someone with your eyes. Unfortunately, this man who looked like an electrician with a vague uniform on got off at the same floor as me, so I was a couple feet away from him walking to my door. Just then I felt like someone punched me in the gut and I was going to throw up all over the place. I tried to turn my head back to see what this fucking man might have in store for me. But I didn't want to be rude and freak him out just in case I was just being paranoid off the ganja. I decided to speed walk back to my room and I quickly opened my door and I quickly shut it. I looked through my peephole and there he was, standing there staring at my door for a few minutes, and then he left. The strangest thing about it was, it looked like he was carrying a toolbox of some kind, but didn't put them to use as assistance for anyone on the floor. Now I know, lady, why you did what you did.